UFC Fight Night, Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Harris flying solo today, but the show must go on as usual. Fight by fight breakdown and analysis from that betting perspective. Want to let you know who to bet on, who to avoid, which underdog perhaps is worth a shot, some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up on this video. Please also subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. We'd greatly appreciate that. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. Now, for this UFC Fight Night event, we have 14 fights overall. We have 6 fights on the prelims, or 6 fights on the main card, I should say, and 8 fights on the prelim. Let's get started right away with fight number 1 of our prelims, and we are looking at Daniel Marcos versus Aoriqileng in the bantamweight division to get us started. Daniel Marcos undefeated, beat Davy Grant back in July. That was via split decision. Aoriqileng, on the other hand, unanimous decision win over Johnny Munoz back in October. It's a good fight to get us started here. Both guys strikers. Aoriqileng super patient, controlled pressure, really picks his shots well. Daniel Marcos, on the other hand, he fights at range. Good technique, good IQ, good movement. Marcos is also patient and calculated. And I think Marcos is the better striker amongst these two fighters. Aoriqileng offensively is more likely to land a takedown, but Daniel Marcos has great takedown defense at 89%. So I really do think that this fight stays on the feet. I do think it'll be competitive. I do think it'll be a close fight. I do think both guys can have moments, but I am going with Daniel Marcos here to get us started. I think his striking is slightly cleaner. I think he's slightly faster. He's slightly more effective as a counterpuncher. It's the minor striking advantages paired with the great takedown defense that I think will fare very well for him in this fight. Again, close and competitive, but I'm going to side with Daniel Marcos to get us started. Fight number 2 of our prelims, Fernie Garcia versus Hyder Amil. For Hyder Amil, he's undefeated. He's making his UFC debut. Fought on Dana White Contender Series back in August. Fernie Garcia, on the other hand, unanimous decision loss to Rinya Nakamura. That was back in August. That's actually 3 losses in a row now for Fernie Garcia. Garcia is actually stepping in on short notice for this fight as well. We still see him or we do see him, I should say, as an underdog in this spot. And I think that makes sense, right? I mean, Garcia, let's give him some credit. He probably has the cleaner striking amongst these two. Garcia, good quick hands, good quick combinations. But Amil's tough. Amil is scrappy. Amil is dangerous. Amil walks his opponents down by any means. And I think that's going to work, or I should say, sometimes that works for him, sometimes that works against him. But Amil is going to be my pick here. Not too comfortably, but I think Amil can get it done because the short notice for Fernie Garcia is going to hurt him here from a cardio perspective, from a fight readiness perspective. Garcia doesn't have a ground game or anything like that, so this should be a pretty one-dimensional fight. We know Hyder Amil coming in with the full training camp. And yes, Garcia could have cleaner striking moments, but with Amil's style, he's going to be in his face. He's going to look to land takedowns. Again, Garcia a bit one-dimensional in that perspective. He's going to try to outdog and capitalize on Garcia coming in on short notice here. And I think there's enough on the Hyder Amil side to make me feel good about picking him for this fight. Now, I will say, coming in as a newcomer in a short notice fight where you haven't really had the time to study your opponent, I probably wouldn't bet on this one because Garcia needs a win. 3 losses in a row, really needs a win. Could have a moment here against a newcomer. But again, from an analytical, predictive perspective, I'm going with Hyder Amil to get it done. Fight number 3, let's look at Zach Pauga versus Bogdan Guskov. Zach Pauga, unanimous decision loss to Modestas Bukauskas back in June. Bogdan Guskov lost his September debut, though, to Volkan Ozdemir. Can't be too mad at that. 2 light heavyweights here that are going to prefer to strike. So that alone is going to tell you that this fight can go either way, right? Because both of these guys are pretty good as strikers. Pauga uses his jab effectively, has good technique. He's going to be the fighter pressing forward, Guskov has really good movement, though. Guskov is really light on his feet. He's explosive. So again, both of these guys are really capable to play their kind of game in the striking. Don't expect a ground game from either of them, but if they do get clinched up, I have more confidence in Zach Pauga. Pauga has kind of that clinched, dirty box approach to his game as well. Whereas Guskov, he looks like he may be, kind of a complete liability on the ground, but also in kind of those clinch moments as well. So I will side with Zach Pauga. However, not confident in this pick at all. I do not think Zach Pauga is a high level fighter. I can see the striking being close. I can see the striking kind of going both ways. But my thought here is that Pauga offers a little bit more in terms of that overall MMA game, in terms of a little bit more of that strategy, clinching up, dirty boxing, different things like that, forward pressure. So again, I think it's gonna go in favor of Zach Pauga, but it is a close fight for sure. Fight number four, let's talk Max Griffin versus Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells lost to Carlston Harris back in August. Max Griffin, unanimous decision loss to Michael Morales back in July. We saw it in Max Griffin's last fight, right? He faced a dangerous striker like Morales, and Morales was too much for him, right? Fighter with good power, fighter with good explosiveness. Griffin struggled to close distance in that fight, almost scared of the power that was coming back. That sets up Jeremiah Wells very well in this fight to be able to play to his strengths, to, be able to play to that explosiveness, to that power, to that danger factor that we know that Jeremiah Wells has in his fights. Like Griffin's last fight, I also think he'll struggle with takedowns, right? He wasn't able to land any takedowns on Michael Morales. Jeremiah Wells, on top of that, has 100% takedown defense. And we know Max Griffin's kind of reliant on that part of his game to feel good from a betting perspective. Jeremiah Wells can also land takedowns of his own, especially against Max Griffin's 69% takedown defense. And Jeremiah Wells, surprisingly, he does have the cardio to be dangerous for all 3 rounds. I say surprisingly because the pace and the aggressiveness and the explosiveness that he goes at times. Again, to have that explosiveness and power to still be able to land takedowns in round two, in round three, still be able to go out there and win you a round, or still be able to go out there and win a fight. Although this could be a good value spot for Max Griffin, he has the experience, he has the toughness, the overall MMA game, the cardio. We know he fights for your money. We know he's a tough opponent against anyone. Despite all of that, my pick is going to be Jeremiah Wells here. I think Jeremiah Wells matches up well in this fight. Again, more dangerous as a striker, more effective as a wrestler, or at least the stronger wrestler, better takedown defense, and possibly even better grappling to go along with that. So overall advantage for Jeremiah Wells. He is going to be my pick in this fight to get it done. Fight number 5 of our prelims. Let's talk Devin Clark versus Marcin Prachnio. Devin Clark lost to Kennedy Nzechukwu back in May. Marcin Prachnio lost to Vitor Petrino back in July. This is one of those fights where can't be too confident on either side here. Neither fighter is a reliable fighter, in my opinion. Devin Clark, we know he has that improved striking, but I still consider his striking to be below par. More of a wrestling, grappling, clinch specialist. 2.3 takedowns per fight. He's going to use that striking just enough to look for those takedown opportunities. Prachnio, on the other hand, much better striker, right? Fights at range, leg heavy attack, lots of calf kicks. Unfortunately for Marcin Prachnio, in this striker versus wrestler type of matchup, I think Prachnio is at a big disadvantage. I don't think Prachnio is good enough of a striker to pull away here, despite being the better striker. And Prachnio just, again, he doesn't have that danger factor on that feet to really be problematic. And more importantly, Prachnio has just 54% takedown defense to go along with that. He gave up 8 takedowns in his last 3 fights. So there's no reason why Devin Clark wouldn't be able to land takedowns. I can see Clark being able to do that. I can see Clark holding his own enough in the striking. And that's going to lead me to think that Devin Clark gets it done here on the scorecards because, again, this is one of those fights, can't be too confident in either fighter to kind of get it done. But I think Devin Clark does just enough to win the rounds. So Devin Clark is going to be my pick. Fight number 6 of our prelims, Loma Lookboonmee versus Bruna, Brasil. Lookboonmee, 2-fight winning streak. She's looking good. She beat Elise Reed last year in February, so 12-month layoff, but that's not too bad. Bruna Brasil, on the other hand, unanimous decision win over Shauna Bannon. That was back in July. It's going to be a good fight. Both ladies here, well-rounded fighters. Both will primarily be looking for their striking. I will say from a betting perspective, I think Loma Lookboonmee is a little bit too steep at minus 310. I kind of understand it. But I mean, Bruna Brasil, has some value. She's comfortable on the feet. She's methodical. She can be explosive. She can be dynamic. She has good kicks. We know Lookboonmee, on the other hand, has that Muay Thai background, pure striker, nasty kicks, good IQ, good timing, good combinations. I would give the striking advantage to Loma Lookboonmee. I do think it's competitive, but Lookboonmee, again, just as that pure striker, I think she's going to be better throughout the fight in the striking exchanges. I say Brazil has value as an underdog because both ladies can land takedowns. Yes, Lookboonmee is more likely to successfully defend takedowns, 74% on the side of Lookboonmee versus 53% on the side of Bruna Brasil, but 74% isn't amazing either, right? So again, Bruna Brasil has some value, but Loma Lookboonmee at this point, I said she's a better striker. She's more likely to defend takedowns. I think she's going to have a few things that work in her advantage. So two key reasons why I like Loma Lookboonmee outside of that analytical stuff. Firstly, she moves at a more reliable pace. She attacks more. Brazil likes to kind of dance around the ring sometimes, not really throw any offense. Secondly, the cardio. I can depend on Loma Lookboonmee being competitive for 15 minutes, whereas Bruna Brasil slows down. So I'll be siding with Loma Lookboonmee here. I think it's a fairly comfortable pick. I think it's going to be a competitive fight, at least for that first round and a half. Loma Lookboonmee should start to pull away. So I feel fairly comfortable in picking Loma Lookboonmee for this fight. However, like I said, minus 310, maybe a little bit too steep, maybe something I put on a parlay. I'm kind of teetering on the fence about this one. But again, from a prediction perspective, I'm going with Loma Lookboonmee. Let's talk fight number 7 of our prelims, Bolaji Oki versus Timothy Cuamba. Oki is a UFC newcomer. He's on an 8-fight winning streak. We see his record there, 8-1. So lost his first pro fight, has won ever since. He fought on Dana White Contender Series back in August. Timothy Cuamba taking advantage of an opportunity here. He's making his debut. He's on a 5-fight winning streak. He's filling in on super short notice here. But he did fight just last week, so should still be in shape. Cuamba has skill for sure. I actually think he's someone that can be effective in the UFC. He looks like a comfortable, patient striker, uses his fakes and feints pretty effectively, picks his shots pretty well. Plus, he can land takedowns, has some grappling. He looks well-rounded, but Oki is still going to be my pick. He's long, he's fast, he's athletic, he's dynamic, great jab, great counter striker. His striking is controlled, really methodical. He has a style of striking that it's counterpunch based, but he also has the ability to be the aggressor, to initiate the offense and to do it effectively. I think the key reason why I like Bolaji Oki in this fight, though, not because it's short notice for Kwon, but like I said, he fought just last week, but rather it's up a weight class. Doesn't mean that he cannot get it done. Again, he has, good overall skill, but Oki will be the bigger fighter, the more athletic fighter, the stronger fighter, possibly even the faster fighter. And I think that means he gets it done. There's weight classes for a reason. Still a short notice for Cuamba. So Oki, I think, gets it done. I want to feel comfortable about this one because of that size difference. So again, I'm going to go Bolaji Oki, but there's always some danger when dealing with newcomers. So always be wary of that. Final fight of our prelims. Let's talk Trevin Giles versus Carlos Prates. Trevin Giles lost to Gabriel Bonfim back in July. Prates, UFC newcomer. He's on a 9-fight winning streak. Competed on Dana White Contender Series back in August. I think it's a tough fight. Very close fight, first and foremost. So, there is reasons to like both fighters here. So naturally, that means that there is value on the underdog Trevin Giles. We know that Giles is competitive. We know that he's live against anyone good skill set. He can strike, good footwork, good striking speed. He can wrestle. He's well-rounded. We know that for sure from Trevin Giles. Prates is a dangerous striker, on the other hand. He's long, he's rangy, he moves well, he's patient as a striker, nasty kicks, explosive. Prates has pretty good takedown defense as well. And Prates also is going to have a significant 4-inch reach advantage in this fight. I bring those 2 ups to say that I think it's going to be hard for Trevin Giles to land takedowns if he's going to try to do that, or really do much with those takedowns, even if he does land it. In terms of the striking, then I think that both guys can have their moments. I think the difference in this fight is the power that Prates has, especially once he starts to stalk his opponents down. In a striking battle, I think that Prates is going to eventually wear on Trevin Giles. I think he's going to eventually start to break him down, possibly even finish Giles. We've seen Giles hurt before. And I think Prates, again, he can do the same thing. He can hurt Giles, right? So Giles definitely has value as an underdog, but my pick is going to be for Carlos Prates, again, mainly because I think just throughout the fight, Prates is going to essentially break him down, potentially finish him. So Carlos Prates will be my pick to get it done. Moving on to our main card, 6 fights overall, like I mentioned on the main card. Fight number 1, let's talk Rodolfo Vieira versus Armen Petrosyan. Rodolfo Vieira beat Cody Brundage back in April. Armen Petrosyan 2-fight winning streak, beating Christian Leroy Duncan back in June. Now, this fight was originally scheduled for November. Truly a clash of styles here. Petrosyan, far better striker, in my opinion. Vieira, much better ground artist. The key stat in this fight, Petrosyan has atrocious takedown defense at 36%. He's been taken down multiple times in his fights. Vieira has landed multiple takedowns in his fights. So, on top of that, any Vieira takedown can lead to the round being over or to the fight being over for Armen Petrosyan. You definitely want to factor that in. And I think Vegas has factored that possibility, priced into this fight, virtually being a pick 'em. We see Petrosyan as the slight underdog in that one. Every round starts on the feet, though. Petrosyan definitely has that ability to fight effectively from distance. And with Vieira's striking being subpar at best, I can see him telegraphing those takedown attempts. I can see Petrosyan being able to stay out of the way and being able to keep it a striking match and being able to keep it on the feet, or at least taking enough of that round away from Vieira, where even if Vieira did land a takedown, doesn't really mean much. Flip a coin on what you think will happen in this one, because I do really think it can be either or, but my coin is going to land on Armen Petrosyan. I think the striking discrepancy is just too much. Like I said, every fight starts on the feet. We saw someone like Cody Brundage clip Rodolfo Vieira multiple times in his last fight, except Brundage made the mistake of, yeah, having a ground game, but choosing to play that ground game with Vieira. I think Petrosyan can also clip Vieira, except Petrosyan's not going to want to play that game with him, right? Petrosyan's going to do everything that he can to avoid that. I also feel like I can trust Petrosyan a little bit more from that cardio perspective. So I'm going to go with Armen Petrosyan here. I think it's a coin flip fight, but I think it's a little bit more of a 60-40, maybe 65-35 for Armen Petrosyan. And especially with him coming in as an underdog, I really like the value there. So Armen Petrosyan is going to be my pick for that one. Second fight of our main card, Michael Johnson versus Darrius Flowers. Darrius Flowers lost it back in July to Jake Matthews. Michael Johnson lost to Diego Ferreira back in May. So both of these guys coming off of losses. Michael Johnson will have the significant UFC experience advantage in this one. Flowers' last fight was his debut, while Michael Johnson has 28 fights in the UFC. That definitely will be meaningful, right? That definitely makes you want to or I should say side with Michael Johnson. Speaking of size, Darrius Flowers absolutely will have a size advantage in this fight. And what's interesting, it's not that he's taller, it's not that he has more reach, but just a few fights ago, Darrius Flowers was actually competing at 185. Then you look at Darrius Flowers' last 2 fights on Dana White Contender Series and his debut, he fought at 170. Now he's fighting at 155 here. So that's going to be really interesting because as a striker, he is dangerous. He does have decent striking. He has good power. He has explosiveness. He stays in front of you. He keeps coming forward, kind of zombie style. But I'll be honest, I'm looking at the odds on this one. I'm seeing the danger for sure that Darius Flowers is. I think Vegas is disrespecting Michael Johnson a little bit here with the odds. Michael Johnson definitely the better striker. Johnson's still one of the best strikers in the division to this day, right? Johnson has good takedown defense at 80%. And even when, or I should say, even if he gives up an early takedown, I think he is going to defend them well in rounds 2 and 3. And it's not like Flowers is some kind of huge grappling threat where we see someone like Michael Johnson has been caught in the past. I also think Michael Johnson has a big cardio advantage in this fight, unless Flowers is coming in amazing shape, right? So I expect Michael Johnson to be able to weather the early storm, then kind of start to cruise here, outstriking Flowers throughout the fight. End of the day, you can't be too confident in a Michael Johnson who's been only 13 and 15 in the UFC, but I don't think Flowers has the tools to get it done here. So Michael Johnson's going to be my pick. I do think Vegas is disrespecting him a little bit on those odds. Doesn't mean that I bet on him though, because again, it is still a Michael Johnson fight. So either way, I'm going to go with Michael Johnson, but be wary from a betting perspective. Fight number 3 of the main card, Brad Tavares versus Gregory Rodrigues. Tavares unanimous decision win over Chris Weidman back in August, where Gregory Rodrigues beat Dennis Tayululin back in August as well. I do see why Gregory Rodrigues is the favorite in this fight for sure. He may be more dangerous virtually everywhere in this fight, at least early in the fight. Both fighters very well rounded, both patient strikers, both have good IQ, both have some power, but the bigger power is with Gregory Rodrigues for sure. Tavares is super consistent though. The ground IQ is there for Brad Tavares, but Gregory Rodrigues has the better overall ground game for sure as well. Better wrestling, better takedowns, better grappling. Tavares has good takedown defense, amazing takedown defense, and Tavares has good consistent cardio. And I think those two factors alone will definitely give him a shot in this one. Tavares is always worth looking at as an underdog against anyone because his game is so complete, right? No glaring weakness. Whereas Gregory Rodrigues, his cardio can be a little bit questionable. Fortunately for Rodrigues, Tavares doesn't really fight at the highest pace. I do think that Gregory Rodrigues will be able to land a takedown or two here. I do think that Gregory Rodrigues will be able to find top control, will be able to, have potential submission attempts as well. And I do think those will be meaningful in scoring the rounds. And in terms of the striking, I think that Rodrigues will have the bigger moments, even if he doesn't necessarily have the better moments at all times. So Gregory Rodrigues is going to be my pick here. However, I think the odds isn't really respecting Brad Tavares in this one and his ability because this will be a very competitive fight. So I like Gregory Rodrigues to get it done. I do not think it's worth the odds, but my pick is still going to be Gregory Rodrigues to get it done. Fight number 4 of our main card, Robert Bryczek versus Ihor Potieria. Potieria is on a 2-fight losing streak, losing to Rodolfo Bellato back in December. Bryczek making his UFC debut on a 5-fight winning streak. It's a new weight class for Ihor Potieria, and that's kind of the story in this fight, coming down from 205 down to 185, which of course is a pretty big cut. And interestingly enough, that actually could solve some of the red flags that he has. Usually pretty bad cardio in his fights, but you got to think that he's maybe in better shape coming down 20 pounds, right? Plus, he hasn't been the most durable fighter. 4 of his 5 losses via KO, TKO. Maybe he could be more effective in a division facing opponents with less power than the opponents he was facing 20 pounds up. So that story is going to be interesting in this one. Potieria, new weight class. Both of these guys are good strikers. Potieria, the tall, long, effective striker from distance, good hands, light on his feet. Bryczek, on the other hand, really good boxing, good footwork, good technique, good timing. I think this is anyone's fight, really a coin flip fight. It's going to be a striking match, and both of these guys are good, capable strikers. Both of them kind of have that cardio red flag going on, so both of them will slow down as the fight goes on, going back to it truly being a coin flip fight. It really just could be about who brings it more that day. But I kind of like the underdog, Ihor Potieria, on this one. I want to take another shot at him He kind of impressed me in his last fight. He looked physically a lot better. I feel like he could have won that fight. A different ref may have stopped it. He had his opponent hurt. That was also a fight where, like I said, he looked a lot better physically, right? So now he looked better in his last fight. Now he's coming down to middleweight. Maybe he's going through some kind of body transformation. I think he can look good in this fight. I think he can, really impress in this fight, really fix that potential cardio issue that he had. He doesn't have to be worried about a ground game in an opponent taking him down. Doesn't have to worry about really stuffing takedowns. He can just kind of keep it true to the striking versus an opponent that's also going to be looking for striking, and he's hungry for the win, right? He's just 1-3 in the UFC. Should have been 2-2 if he if that last fight was stopped. And rather than going 1-4, he's going to be looking to be someone that gets back into the win column. So I'm going to assume he's motivated in a new weight class here. So Ihor Potieria is going to be my pick to get it done. Let's talk fight number 5, Dan Ige. This is the co-main event. Dan Ige versus Andre Fili. Dan Ige unanimous decision loss to Bryce Mitchell back in September. Andre Fili beat Lucas Almeida back in December. Fili stepping in on short notice here. I think this is a huge opportunity for him, but I'll try to keep this one short. I think Dan Ige is the much smarter pick here, especially at these odds. Both of these guys are vets, both well-rounded fighters, no glaring weakness in either one of their games. Fili is statistically more likely to land takedowns, especially against Dan Ige's 56% takedown defense. That's probably the only advantage that he has in this fight. But the difference between these two guys is that, Fili's the type of fighter that you put against a guy that's trying to make a name for himself. Dan Ige is the type of fighter that you put against a legitimate contender or someone that's potentially on the brink of being a contender, right? So I think there's levels. I think Ige is the higher level fighter here. I think Ige is the more reliable fighter here when you expect a fighter to get a win. I think analytically, Ige is the better striker. And I think especially after his last fight where he was taken down 5 times against a wrestler, I think he's going to be really mindful to keep his fights on the feet. On top of that, Fili is the type of fighter to oblige to that rather than to try to force a takedown game. He's not really a true wrestler in that sense. So I like Dan Ige here, just higher level, both well-rounded, both vets. Ige's the higher level. Ige gets it done. Let's move on to our main event of the evening. We have Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer. Middleweight main event here, high stakes main event. Jack Hermansson, last time he fought, December 2022, he lost to Roman Dolidze at that time. Joe Pyfer, on the other hand, beat Abdul Razak Al Hassan back in October, and he's 3-0 in the UFC now. Huge step up in competition for Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is a name that the UFC is definitely trying to push. 35 years old on the side of Jack Hermansson, 14-month layoff. I wonder how sharp Hermansson is going to be. I wonder if he's actually going to be at his best in this fight, which we know his best is a very competitive type of opponent. Either way, Hermansson has a path here, right? I think Hermansson's striking is more polished. I think he's faster, more consistent. He can outstrike Pyfer all fight, like he did against a Chris Curtis, for example, right? Hermansson can legitimately wrestle or grapple with anyone in the division, Joe Pyfer included. And Hermansson has the significantly deeper resume. He's taken on guys better than Pyfer, whereas this is Pyfer's biggest fight. So definitely a legitimate path for Jack Hermansson. Definitely has value as an underdog. If you're predicting him to get it done, I cannot be mad at that prediction whatsoever. Joe Pyfer, on the other hand, provides a threat, maybe not as a better striker, but as the more dangerous striker. Jack Hermansson, 8 losses. 3 of those losses had been via KO TKO. So he's been finished before. And I think Joe Pyfer can capitalize on that. Both of these guys can land takedowns. We know that. But I think Joe Pyfer is more likely to land takedowns. I think Joe Pyfer is the better wrestler. I think he's the stronger wrestler, the more, physically stronger wrestler. Ultimately, I have to go, or I should say, I want to go with Jack Hermansson because he has value, right? Like I said, but ultimately I am going to side with the favorite. I am going to side with Joe Pyfer to get it done here. I think the danger factor plays a role. Jack Hermansson, he was having a decent fight in his last fight, but that danger factor of Roman Dolidze prevailed. I can see the danger factor of Joe Fight Pyfer prevailing in this fight. That explosiveness and power on the feet, that offensive wrestling, that opportunity to take on a name like a Jack Hermansson and get that on your resume and get an opponent like a Jack Hermansson who hasn't been active for 14 months at 35 years old. I think there are, it's kind of this aligns for Joe Pyfer to get it done. I think this is good matchmaking by the UFC to give Pyfer a very good name, but a name that is maybe not at his best, a little bit older, where Pyfer again has that danger factor. So it's going to be a very tough matchup for sure, but my pick in this one is going to be Joe Pyfer. Let's move on to the Vegas side of things. Let's take a look from a betting perspective, underdog picks, as well as some parlay picks. Now, I mean, I'm not going to read out all the underdogs in this situation, but I do have two underdogs that I am looking at. One of those underdogs, Armen Petrosyan, I gave the reasons for that one. Way better striker, and I think he's going to have the ability to keep it on the feet, and I think he has more reliable cardio. I think he's the better fighter outside of Vieira's grappling threat. So Petrosyan, I like the underdog value there. I also like the underdog value on Ihor Potieria. That is a little bit more of kind of making a bet on him continuing to significantly improve. I think, again, physically looking better at 205 in his last fight, then coming down to 185. This could be a fighter that's really looking to make vast improvements, and I'm kind of betting on that factor of it with some value in this underdog spot. I wouldn't parlay them though. I would be looking at them as individual bets. In terms of some parlay action, this may be a slightly riskier ticket, but this is a ticket that I believe holds a lot of value. Looking at Jeremiah Wells as one of my picks, I am looking at Dan Ige as one of my picks, and I'm looking at Bolaji Oki as one of my picks. Now, again, this is a bit of a juicier parlay, bit of a riskier parlay, but there's reasons to feel pretty good about each fighter in these respective fights. Jeremiah Wells just going to bring the fight to Max Griffin. Griffin is not going to be able to handle that. Danny Gay, there's levels compared to Andre Fili. Tough fight, close fight, competitive fight, well-rounded fight, veteran fight. But Ige is just a level above Fili, I should say. And Bolaji Oki is going to have the weight class advantage. We've seen some smaller weight class guys move up one division and have troubles, regardless of being the better fighter on paper. Cuamba, on top of that, isn't even necessarily the better fighter on paper and is coming in on just a few days' notice. So I like Bolaji Oki in that spot. He has the size, has the skill to get it done. That's going to be, like I said, a juicier parlay at 3.92. That means our smaller bettors, $100 will get you $392. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return 982. So let's sign off on that note. This has been UFC Fight Night. Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer, full card prediction video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Again, please press the thumbs up on this video. Please subscribe to the channel as well at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, want to hear from you in the comments. How do you feel about my parlay? How do you feel about my underdog picks? What underdog picks are you considering? What parlays are you looking at? What props are you looking at? And of course, if there's any situation you just want a further breakdown on, let that be known in the comments, and we're more than happy to have that conversation with you. Harris, like I said, flying solo today, but it's all good because the show must go on here at Boxing MMA Picks in our usual fashion. Let's get this money.